The story opens in the sleepy, picturesque town of Rose Hill, a place where neighbors know each other by name, children play freely in the streets, and life moves at an unhurried pace. The sense of safety and familiarity is so strong that no one imagines anything terrible could ever happen here, until the unthinkable occurs. On an ordinary afternoon, 4 children, Bethy, Kevin, Lucy, and Petey, walk home from school together, laughing and chatting as they always do. The sun is shining, the path is familiar, and there's no hint of danger. But when the children fail to arrive home at their usual time, parents begin to worry. At first, they assume the kids might have stopped to play or wandered off on a small adventure. But as minutes stretch into hours, panic sets in. Frantic parents search the usual spots, the playground, the creek, friends' houses, but find no trace of the missing children. The sheriff is called, and soon the entire town is mobilized in a desperate search. The once peaceful streets of Rose Hill are now filled with shouting voices, flashlights cutting through the gathering dusk, and a growing sense of dread. As night falls, the reality sinks in. 4 children have vanished without a trace. No witnesses, no clues, no explanation. The tight-knit community, once bound by trust and familiarity, is now gripped by fear and suspicion. Could someone in Rose Hill have taken them? Was it a stranger passing through? Or is there something even darker at play? This opening scene sets the tone for the entire story. A quiet town shattered by an inexplicable tragedy, ordinary lives upended in an instant, and the terrifying question, what happened to the children? The disappearance not only drives the plot forward, but also exposes the fragility of safety in a place where everyone thought they were protected. The story begins with an almost idyllic portrait of Rose Hill, a small American town where the houses have wide porches and freshly painted shutters, where the school bell rings at precisely 3:15 p.m., and where children walk home in groups, kicking pebbles and trading secrets. The author paints Rose Hill as the kind of place where crime is something that happens elsewhere, a tragedy read about in newspapers, not something that stains their own quiet streets. The town's rhythm is predictable, comforting. Parents don't worry when their children are out of sight because everyone knows everyone. On this particular afternoon, the air is crisp with the first hints of autumn, and the 4 missing children, Bethy, Kevin, Lucy, and Petey, take their usual route home from school. They pass the old oak tree where Bethy once scraped her knee, the bend in the road where Kevin swears he saw a ghost last Halloween, and the overgrown field where Lucy and Petey sometimes hunt for frogs. Nothing seems amiss. But then, something shifts. Maybe it's the way the wind suddenly stills, or how the laughter of the children fades a little too quickly. The narrative doesn't reveal the exact moment they vanish, only that they do. 1 minute, they're there. The next, they're gone. The road is empty. A single discarded lunchbox lies in the dust, its lid half open, as if dropped in haste. At first, no one panics. Mrs. Tanner, Bethy's mother, assumes her daughter stopped at a friend's house. Mr. O'Donnell, Kevin's father, grumbles that the boy probably lost track of time playing in the woods. But as the sun dips lower and front doors remain unanswered, unease creeps in. Phone lines buzz between houses. Have you seen them? Did they come home with yours? By dusk, the entire town is in motion. Fathers grab flashlights and form search parties, fanning out across backyards and ditches. Mothers stand in clusters, arms crossed tightly over their chests, voices hushed but urgent. The sheriff's car rolls slowly down Main Street, its headlights cutting through the gathering dark. The local diner becomes an impromptu command center, with maps spread across sticky tabletops and coffee going cold in untouched mugs. And then, the first real sign of trouble. Bethy's hair ribbon, the one her grandmother gave her for her birthday, is found snagged on a thorn bush near the edge of town. The pink fabric is dirty, but unmistakable. It's too far from where the children should have been, too deliberately placed. That's when the fear turns real, because now they know this wasn't an accident. The children didn't wander off. They were taken. The scene closes with Rose Hill no longer a postcard-perfect town, but a place of shadows and whispered suspicions. Neighbors eye each other differently. The man who runs the gas station, the one who never talks much, suddenly seems too quiet. The old widow who watches children from her porch now feels unsettling, not just lonely. And beneath it all, the unspoken question: who among us could have done this? This opening isn't just about the mystery, it's about the loss of innocence, both for the children and the town itself. Rose Hill will never be the same after this day. The morning after the children vanish, Rose Hill wakes to a different kind of silence. The usual sounds of screen doors slamming and bicycle tires crunching over gravel are absent. Instead, there's a heavy quiet, broken only by the occasional murmur of voices huddled on porches or the static crackle of police radios. The town square, normally lively with farmers setting up their market stalls, feels like a stage after the actors have left, empty and strangely artificial. Sheriff Wade, a man more accustomed to writing speeding tickets than handling a missing persons case, stands in the elementary school parking lot, squinting against the rising sun. The chalk outlines of hopscotch squares on the pavement seem to mock him. He's already called in county reinforcements, and now state investigators move through the scene with a clinical efficiency that makes the locals uneasy. They watch from a distance as strangers in crisp uniforms bag a half-eaten apple found near the sidewalk, photograph a single sneaker print in the mud, and stretch yellow tape across the path the children should have taken home. Inside the Tanner household, the air is thick with the smell of stale coffee and burnt toast. No one had the heart to eat. Bethy's mother, Claire Tanner, sits at the kitchen table clutching her daughter's favorite stuffed rabbit, the one Bethy insisted was too babyish to bring to school but still slept with every night. Across from her, Sheriff Wade removes his hat and chooses his words carefully, but each one lands like a stone. No leads, no witnesses, no ransom note. Claire's hands tighten around the rabbit until the stitching strains. Meanwhile, at the edge of town, a different kind of search unfolds. Kevin O'Donnell's older brother, a high school football player with a reputation for trouble, leads a pack of teenagers through the dense woods behind the abandoned mill. Their flashlights cut erratic paths between the trees as they call out names that echo back to them unanswered. One boy kicks at a pile of leaves with sudden violence, sending a spray of red and gold into the air. "They can't just be gone," he mutters, and the others pretend not to hear the crack in his voice. Back at the sheriff's office, the town's secrets begin to surface. The normally unflappable secretary hesitates before sliding a manila folder across the desk, a list of every registered sex offender within 50 miles. The names blur together until one jumps out, a certain Mr. Ellison, who served time years ago but now lives quietly on the outskirts of Rose Hill, his past carefully buried beneath a veneer of Sunday church attendance and prompt trash can retrieval. By nightfall, the whispers start. The diner cook mentions how Mr. Ellison always ordered 2 milkshakes when only one car was in his driveway. The librarian recalls him lingering too long near the children's section. Even level-headed Mrs. from the flower shop shudders while describing how he once complimented Petey's curly hair. The facts are thin, but fear is fertile ground for suspicion. As the investigation stretches into its second day, 2 stark realities emerge. First, that the familiar streets of Rose Hill hide more shadows than anyone realized. And second, that time is slipping away. With every passing hour, the children's laughter grows fainter in memory, and the unthinkable becomes more possible. The town's once unshakable trust is eroding, replaced by sideways glances and locked doors. Rose Hill is learning the hard way that monsters don't just live in storybooks. Sometimes they live next door. The third morning dawns gray and damp over Rose Hill, as if the sky itself has absorbed the town's despair. A fine mist clings to the empty playground swings, their chains creaking faintly in the wind like ghosts of the children who should be laughing there. The search parties, their numbers dwindling as hope fades, move with a mechanical exhaustion, their boots leaving temporary impressions in the wet earth that disappear moments after they pass. It's young Tommy Wilkins, barely 12, with scraped knees and a stubborn determination to help, who first spots it. While adults comb through the same familiar areas for the third time, Tommy ventures further, drawn to the crumbling stone wall that marks the boundary between the schoolyard and the overgrown field beyond. Something flutters there, a flash of pink against the dull green and brown, nearly invisible unless the light hits it just right. Bethy's hair ribbon, the delicate satin strip, now dirt-stained and frayed at the edges, still bears the tiny daisy pattern Claire Tanner had so carefully ironed onto the fabric. It clings to a jagged piece of the wall, as if placed there deliberately, a silent scream in the stillness. Tommy's breath catches in his throat. He doesn't touch it. He's seen enough crime shows to know better, but his shout brings the others running, their voices sharp with a mix of dread and desperate hope. The discovery electrifies the weary searchers. Sheriff Wade arrives within minutes, his face unreadable as he crouches to examine the ribbon through a plastic evidence bag. The way it's snagged suggests motion, a child running perhaps, or being pulled. His flashlight beam traces a path beyond the wall to where the grass is trampled in an unnatural line, leading toward the skeletal silhouette of the old Harlow farmhouse, half a mile distant. The place has been empty for years, its windows like hollow eyes watching their approach. At the Tanner house, Claire clutches the phone receiver so tightly her knuckles bleach white as the sheriff explains what they've found. The ribbon's presence so far off the children's usual path confirms her worst fear. They didn't wander away. They were taken. Yet there's a perverse relief in the horror. Finally, a thread to pull, a direction to move in. She hangs up and stares at Bethy's school photo on the wall, the ribbon in the picture an exact match to the one now bagged as evidence. The room tilts around her. By noon, the farmhouse is swarmed. Deputies fan out across the property, their footsteps echoing through rotting floorboards as they call the children's names. Upstairs, a single bedroom holds a child-sized handprint in the dust on the windowsill. The basement door is padlocked, newer than the house itself, and the sheriff's jaw tightens as he radios for bolt cutters. But it's what they find outside that chills them most. 4 small stones arranged in a perfect row near the back steps, each painted with a single initial, B-K-L-P. A deliberate marker. A taunt. Someone wanted them to know the children had been here. As the sheriff stares at those stones, the case shifts around him. This isn't just a disappearance anymore. The rain comes down in sheets as Sheriff Wade's cruiser pulls up to the modest, well-kept cottage on the edge of town. The flower boxes under the windows burst with cheerful petunias, and a neatly painted mailbox reads R. Ellison in careful script. It's the last place anyone would expect evil to hide, which is exactly why it does. Inside, the air smells of lemon polish and something faintly medicinal. Mr. Ellison, a slight, silver-haired man who taught Sunday school for 15 years, offers the sheriff tea with hands that don't quite tremble. His eyes flicker toward the hallway closet as Wade questions him, just for a heartbeat too long. Then the sheriff notices it, a flash of pink peeking from under the closet door, the exact shade of Bethy's missing ribbon. Ellison's pleasant demeanor fractures like thin ice. His teacup clatters against its saucer as he stammers an explanation. His niece visited last week. It must be hers. But Wade's already moving toward the closet. What he finds inside isn't just a ribbon. Taped to the back wall are dozens of photographs, school playground shots, birthday parties at the park, close-ups of children's faces caught mid-laugh. And there, circled in red marker, are 4 familiar faces. Bethy blowing out candles, Kevin scoring a touchdown, Lucy chasing butterflies, Petey grinning with an ice cream cone. But the worst discovery comes from Ellison's own lips. As the sheriff reads him his rights, the man's shoulders slump, and he whispers something that chills the room. "They're better off with me." Outside, lightning splits the sky as the truth hits Wade with physical force. This isn't some stranger's crime. The monster was here all along. The man who handed out hymnals every Sunday, who organized the church picnic, who always had butterscotch candies in his pocket for the kids. Rose Hill's nightmare has a face now, and it's one they all recognized. The rain had turned the back roads to mud by the time Sheriff Wade's cruiser fishtailed up the gravel drive. The Ellison place looked like something off a postcard. White picket fence, blue shutters, that big old sugar maple out front where neighborhood kids used to gather for lemonade in summers past. Wade remembered seeing Mr. Ellison, Robert, everyone called him, reading Bible stories to a circle of wide-eyed children under that very tree at last year's church picnic. The memory made his stomach turn as he stepped onto the porch. The door swung open before he could knock. "Sheriff?" Robert Ellison stood framed in golden light, his cardigan buttoned neatly over a pressed collared shirt, the scent of cinnamon and something baking wafted out behind him. "I was just taking my apple crisp out of the oven. Would you care for some?" Up close, Wade noticed how the man's fingers trembled around the oven mitt. A single bead of sweat traced its way down his temple despite the autumn chill. Inside, the house was a museum of normalcy. Cross-stitched Bible verses adorned the walls. A well-worn recliner faced the television, where the evening news played silently. On the coffee table, Wade's breath caught, sat a stack of Rose Hill Elementary newsletters. "You keep up with the school events, Robert?" Ellison's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Oh, you know how it is. Old habits. I do miss teaching Sunday school." He busied himself with dessert plates. "Though, I suppose parents don't want a man like me around their children anymore." The words hung in the air like a noose. Wade's flashlight beam revealed what the dim lamplight hid, scuff marks on the hardwood leading toward the basement door, fresh ones. And was that, yes, a tiny handprint in the dust on the doorframe. The crash came from the kitchen. Ellison had dropped the ceramic baking dish, sending glass and steaming apples across the linoleum. "Clumsy me," he laughed, but his eyes darted wildly to the hallway closet. That's when Wade saw it, the faintest glimmer of pink satin peeking beneath the closet door. Bethy's ribbon. What happened next unfolded in slow motion. Ellison lunging for the fireplace poker. Wade's service weapon clearing its holster. The closet door bursting open to reveal not just the ribbon, but a wall papered with photographs. Candid shots of Rose Hill's children at the park, the pool, the ice cream social. And at the center, 4 faces circled in red. Bethy blowing out birthday candles. Kevin in his Little League uniform. Lucy holding her prize-winning science project. Petey asleep on the school bus. But the true horror lay in the carefully labeled box beneath them. "My treasures," Ellison whispered, his voice breaking as the poker clattered to the floor. Inside were locks of hair, dozens of them, each in a tiny Ziploc bag with a name and date. Some went back 20 years. The final blow came from the basement. As backup units screeched into the driveway, Wade's flashlight illuminated the freshly dug earth in the corner. A child's sneaker, muddy but unmistakably new, protruded from the loose soil. Ellison's confession came between sobs. "I only wanted to save them. This world, it's so cruel to innocent souls." Outside, the rain slowed to a drizzle as the first news vans arrived. The maple tree's branches clawed at the darkening sky like skeletal fingers. Somewhere beneath its roots, Wade realized with dawning horror, other small shoes might be waiting to be found. Rose Hill would never look at its postcard-perfect streets the same way again. The devil hadn't come to town. He'd been here all along, baking apple crisps and chaperoning field trips. And that truth was more terrifying than any stranger danger they'd ever warned their children about. The storm had reached its peak when Sheriff Wade's flashlight cut through the blackness of Ellison's basement. The beam trembled in his grip as it illuminated what should never have existed. A door. Not some old wooden cellar entrance, but a heavy steel thing with industrial bolts, like something from a prison. The air grew thicker with each step down, the scent of damp earth undercut by something sharper, fear, sweat, urine, the metallic tang of blood on rusted metal. Then came the sound. Faint at first, just a whimper, really, but it turned Wade's blood to ice, because he knew that voice. Every parent in Rose Hill would know that voice. "Please, I want my mom." Bethy Tanner's words sent Wade crashing into the door, his shoulders screaming in protest as the metal groaned open. The flashlight revealed a nightmare staged like a perverted classroom. 4 small cots bolted to the concrete floor, walls covered in crayon drawings of stick figure families, a shelf lined with juice boxes and animal crackers, the same brand the elementary school served. And there, huddled together like abandoned dolls, were the children. Bethy clutched Lucy's hand so tight their fingers had gone white. Kevin's left eye was swollen shut, his usual swagger reduced to silent shivers. Little Petey rocked back and forth, his Sesame Street shirt crusted with what Wade prayed was chocolate. But it was what hung above them that made the sheriff's knees give way. A massive corkboard displaying their own missing posters, news clippings about the search, and Polaroids Ellison had taken of the town's grief. The bastard had documented every anguished moment. "He made us call him Uncle Robbie," Lucy whispered, pointing to the corner where an old camcorder sat on a tripod. "Said we were his special students now." Wade's radio crackled to life as backup finally arrived upstairs, but the children flinched at the noise, their reactions too practiced, too conditioned. That's when he saw the cattle prod leaning against the wall, saw the bucket in the corner, saw the way Kevin instinctively put himself between the others and the door. The rescue turned to horror as paramedics lifted Petey's shirt, a latticework of burns forming letters. B.A.D. Ellison's handwriting. Upstairs, the monster sobbed into his cuffed hands about salvation and corrupted youth, about how he'd saved them from modern wickedness. But in the basement, the truth lay in the spiral notebook Wade found beneath Bethy's cot, page after page of forced writing exercises. "I love Uncle Robbie best. My real parents are sinners. I will never leave my new home." The final entry in shaky child's script read, "Tomorrow we get our forever marks." As rain lashed against the basement windows, Wade realized these weren't just victims. They were survivors of a game only Ellison understood the rules to, one that might have ended in unmarked graves beneath that deceptively cheerful maple tree. When the first medic carried Bethy up into the storm, she didn't reach for her rescuer. She didn't cry. She simply stared at the broken man in the patrol car and whispered 3 words that would haunt Rose Hill for generations. Not for their lives, perhaps, but for whatever innocence Ellison hadn't already carved out of them. The children were coming home, but no one yet understood, least of all their parents, that parts of them never would. The rain stopped the morning they brought the children back to Rose Hill, but the clouds didn't part so much as simply exhaust themselves. A sickly yellow light seeped through the gloom as the ambulances rolled down Main Street, past handmade welcome home signs that already looked like artifacts from another time. The town held its breath as the vehicles passed. No sirens, no flashing lights, as if moving too quickly might shatter what was left inside. The Tanner house smelled of fresh-baked cookies no one would eat. Claire Tanner stood at the screen door, her hands leaving damp prints on the metal frame as the medic helped Bethy up the walkway. Her daughter moved differently, not the skipping, twirling girl who'd left for school that last morning, but someone older, someone careful. When Claire swept her into an embrace, she felt it immediately. Across town, Kevin O'Donnell's father found his son sitting motionless in the bathtub at 3 a.m., still wearing his jacket, scrubbing at his skin until the water turned pink. The tough-as-nails little leaguer who'd never cried after a fastball to the ribs now screamed when his father tried to take the washcloth away. At the elementary school, someone had already painted over the 4 empty desks. But the children noticed. Oh, they noticed. The way teachers jumped when a book fell too loudly, the new rule that no one could use the bathroom alone. Lucy's little sister asked why her big girl didn't want to play tea party anymore, why she checked the closet 7 times before bed. The town square memorial, 4 backpacks hung on the war monument, stuffed with flowers and teddy bears, was taken down after Petey had his first episode at the sight of it. His mother found him that evening methodically tearing apart his own stuffed animals, searching for something he wouldn't name. Sheriff Wade spent his nights now parked outside the Ellison house, though the man would never return. The new owners had already begun renovations, fresh paint over the basement walls, that ominous maple tree cut down to a stump. But sometimes, when the wind blew just right, neighbors swore they could still hear children's laughter from the empty lot. At Sunday services, the pastor spoke of healing. The newspaper called it a closed case. The child psychologist from the city used words like resilience and recovery timeline. But in the Tanner kitchen, where Bethy now slept curled in a blanket nest on the floor instead of her bed, Claire watched her daughter trace the letters on her wrist where the burns had begun to scar. Outside, the first winter snow began to fall, covering Rose Hill in a clean, white silence. The children were home. The monster was gone. And yet, some doors, once opened, can never fully be closed again. The town would move on. The children would learn to smile at the right times. But every parent in Rose Hill now checked their locks twice. Every teacher counted heads compulsively. And in 4 houses across town, nightlights burned around the clock. Not for the children, but for the adults who needed to see that shadow in the corner was just a coat on a chair. Not everything lost can be found. Not every wound scabs over. And in the quiet hours before dawn, when the wind rattled the last dead leaves of autumn, Rose Hill wondered if they'd ever really gotten their children back at all. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell for more. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. See you in the next one. Bye for now.